So to start with, we thought it would be a good idea to just learn who you are. So Hannah, can we start with you and then just work over to the left?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Hannah Charlton, and I am my role is Head of Insight for Brand and CX, and that's at Cambridge University and Press. And we do, just so you know, learning and assessment materials, and I specialise in English language. So a lot of our biggest markets are Spain, Italy, Latin America, and then Vietnam. So obviously non-English speaking markets.
And you've moved from agency to client side?
Yes, sorry, I should say that. Yeah, I moved from an agency role, so I was at various different agencies, and I did that for about 7 years, and I've been client side for almost 5 years now.
I'm Jake, so I'm the account director at Question Pro, so ResTech, previously agency side, then moved client side, and now ResTech. So I've done the nearly full 360, I would say. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, I'm Iain Stanfield. I look after the insight team at Specsavers for the UK, Ireland and Spain. I've been at Specsavers about just going up 6 years, and that's my first client-side role. Before that, it was all agencies, big and small, so the Cantars, Milber Browns of this world, GfKs, but some of the smaller ones as well, Nunwoods, Box Clevers of this world. Did have a little bit of a foray into account planning and strategic planning at an ad agency, Ogilvy and Mather, for 5 years as well.
I'm Sarah Macdonald. I'm a senior UX researcher at Tesco at the moment. I started working in marketing research agencies in South Africa, and I've been in London for about 12 years now. I've worked in agencies for a while, and then during the pandemic I got made redundant and then sort of like pivoted from there into like CX and UX. So I've been working in that client side for about 4 years now in total.
My name is Graham Idehen. I'm Senior Director for Customer Experience at D-Scout, a research experience platform. I've been in my role for about 13 months now. Previously was in market research for 25 years, giving away my age. A long time, so that's why I'm involved in this, the transition from market research into user research.
My question, and I hope that this is applicable to all of you, and I imagine that it is just thinking about the theme in general and talking about transitions, whether that is from client side to agency or from a certain type of research to another type of research. What sort of led you to pursue that change? And I recognize somebody mentioned there was a redundancy in there, but also you could have opted to stay in the same in the same lane post redundancy when you searched, but it looks like you made a pivot. So I would love to just hear about some of the motivations that led to looking for a change in career path.
I'll go first. So for me personally, it was some personal reasons. So I live in Cambridge, and at the time I was commuting a lot in and out of London. So this was pre kind of like hybrid working days and things like that. So it was an awful lot of commuting, and there was an awful lot of travel as well, which was really exciting. And I was very excited by that, but it was more kind of, I wanted to bring my life more to Cambridge really, so I started kind of looking out, and I loved working agency side. I was working with an amazing agency, one that I'm still in contact with and actually have commissioned research with, so a really great relationship there. It's just that I personally wanted to kind of bring my life more kind of local to Cambridge. But then there were also these kind of burning questions that I had that had just built up over the time that I'd spent agency side, and a lot of it was like, what are these clients doing with the insight after I've delivered it to them? Like, what are they doing with these recommendations? How are they implementing them? And I just really wanted to get deeper into understanding that and playing a part in that and playing a role there. So I wasn't actively really looking. I wasn't with a recruiter. This kind of job popped up and it just really felt like fate. So I kind of went to it. But I'm traditionally a qualitative researcher. So you get quite a lot of quant researchers, client side. So again, I felt like I was really out on a limb, but it kind of all worked out in the end. So yeah. That's kind of me.
And has it lived up to expectations?
Yeah, I mean, partly. There's an awful lot, and I don't know whether this is partly the brand that I work for, the business that I work for, it's owned by obviously an ancient brand, a heritage brand, has been around for hundreds of years, and there's a lot of kind of like red tape, and it's a bit like trying to move the Titanic. Like, it can take a long time, and that was like a real shock to me when I first went client side. I was like, oh my goodness, like, we've got this here, why aren't we changing, why aren't we moving? So that's kind of been a big learning curve for me, as well as kind of learning those influencing skills as well, and knowing who to influence and at what stage to kind of get them to really grasp the insight and move it forwards.
I'm going to say a very similar story, I would say. So I was that standard agency researcher who at 5 o'clock on a Friday gets a client emailing you to say, we really need this report by 5:30. And I thought, excuse my French, but what the hell are you going to be doing with that report at 5:30 on a Friday in the business? So I thought, what on earth goes on the other side of the fence from a research point of view? So joined client side to get under the skin of, after an agency, maybe do all the work, or you do the work from a DIY platform. How can you make all of the sort of impact behind the scenes, and to show your value as a researcher? And then probably going through that experience, the one question I didn't ask during that interview process was, how does research get implemented at the moment at your organisation? Because I was the very first researcher in the business. And that was the number one mistake I made going through that switch, was understanding at the moment in time, how on earth is research used? So I would then have got a vibe for how much investment is going to go into that function. Is it going to be underutilised? Is it going to be utilised? Am I going to be a big fish or small fish in a big pond? All those sorts of questions that are super important if you're a client-side researcher. Then went to ResTech, helping client-side researchers and agency researchers utilise a ResTech platform as well. But it's definitely a learning curve for looking out for that client-side opportunity, what's got to be super right for you and the personality that you have as well.
So having moved away from client side, would you go back to client side now, knowing what to ask?
I would, yes. But I would be super picky in terms of who it was and the culture, what research they were conducting, how it was conducted. I would be possibly that super annoying person in an interview space who would ask more questions than the person interviewing me, just to get the right fit for me.
As a recruitment consultant, I would say that's a very good thing.
Some people find that annoying as well. But I think, that's super important to get 100% out of a researcher, because what I did learn straight away, that it is the same business. So agency side, client side, it's the same amount of work. It's just a different busy in some cases. But it's definitely got to be the right culture and the right fit for you when you go into that sort of space to make it work for you. Definitely a learning curve for sure.
I think I'm going to say very similar things actually. I've been in research for 35 years now, and I'd worked agency side, and basically I'd got fed up with a big agency, too much politics, don't get recognised enough, go to a small one, no money, doing everything, go back to a big one, go back to a small one. And I've been looking for client-side roles, and I've applied for so many different ones: Transport for London, InBev, Speedo, Greater Manchester, public transport, so a variety, just to get to that same point that Jake was making around, you do research, you'd put in a report, you'd do a presentation, everyone would be nodding along, and then you'd see the ad come out 6 months later and you'd go, that's nothing like anything that we researched. Or products had come out and you go, where did that come from? And just having that gap of trying to work out what you were doing and what it was actually impacting. Not all the time. There were some ads that looked very much like the ads that we tested or the recommendations that we put in. But there was that gap, and so, but I kept going for the interviews. I'd get down to the last two. Oh, sorry, Iain, but the other person had got some client-side experience. So one of the things I would say is if you're going to make that, if you're thinking about it, don't leave it too long, because the number of jobs, the more senior you get, does go down and down and down within the client side a lot quicker than it goes down, I think, within agencies. And then my wife got a job in Guernsey, completely out of the blue. She doesn't work in our sector at all. She's a knowledge manager for a law firm, an even smaller sector than market research. And she got this job in Guernsey, and I'd never been to Guernsey at the time. I knew nothing about Guernsey. The one thing I knew about it was there was a guy that I worked with 10 years before who worked for Specsavers in Guernsey. And I was going to work remotely. I worked remotely for an agency in Leeds. They'd said, go and work in Guernsey. You don't come into the office very often anyway. This was still pre-COVID. And he said, I'll get you a job. And here I am. So after all that trying to get this job, then it just ended up with, it was about the only job I could do on Guernsey. So if there is a thing, go to Guernsey. Go somewhere where there's nobody else with your skills.
And having been your dream for 20 years, how has it lived up to expectations?
It has fulfilled. I do see where it goes from research to a business decision. The thing that I think naively I thought was that it's just being told in the wrong way. They didn't get what I was saying. People still don't listen to the decisions all the time. It's just, at least I can see why they haven't listened to it. Because sometimes there are reasons, business reasons, commercial reasons, supply chain reasons, financial reasons, as to why something doesn't get implemented in the way that the research would suggest. But you do get to understand what those are, and I think that helps with research in that you understand that it isn't just about the voice of the customer. There are loads of other things that go into a business decision, and you do get to see those play out from sort of behind the curtain, which is quite good. I genuinely think I'm a better, broader researcher now, despite the fact that I've done 30 years in the sector. Just from that one bit, it's sort of like a different skill set that you have it's quite difficult to pick up without being on that side, because you just don't appreciate the decision-making process, who does what, who has the say. Specsavers is the opposite of Cambridge University. The company's only 40 years old. It was 40 years old yesterday. The two people who founded it, Doug and Mary Perkins, are still owners and very much there, even though Mary was 80 yesterday. Still comes into the office every day. The decisions are made like that, and your chance to try and get some insight into that quick decision-making process. It's probably the most successful opticians chain in privately owned in the world. What on earth can you tell me, Iain, about people that I don't know because we've made this business? That's quite a challenge, but it is an interesting dynamic to work in as to how you make yourself valuable. It's different in research agencies. Someone's paying you to do something. You want to show that you're better than the other agencies that are pitching. But someone's already decided that research is going to be useful, whereas, say, I joined, the guy that got me the job left immediately. I don't think it was related to me joining, but it did mean I was the only researcher in the business for a while, with no structure, no processes. Specsavers still hasn't got many processes. It's a different world.
Okay, so I've been working in marketing research agencies for a while, and it was just starting to get kind of stale, if I'm perfectly honest. Like, I prefer being a practitioner, so I don't want to really manage a team, or like the higher up you go, especially if the agency's bigger, you'll end up managing people. It's fine to be quality controlling somebody's work, but like that whole management thing, I didn't necessarily want to do that. Like, I quite like being like in the weeds of all the research and kind of like digging through the findings and giving the recommendations. So I didn't know what I was going to do to mix it up. So, this is, research is like, by that stage, is like the only thing I knew. So I just didn't know how to orchestrate a change. And just my hand was forced, luckily, So I landed up getting made redundant, and my company tried to help me find like another role within one of their sister companies. And I just looked at the list of things going, and I thought, like, I don't know what any of this is. I couldn't possibly do. What are these things? And then my manager said, well, there's one here, like that's customer development, like a customer development role. And he was like, that's actually a research role. Like it's like a research bent to that. So just go apply for that. So I applied for it and I got it, and it was a lot more like CX focused. So it was like there was prototype testing, so there was like an opportunity to pick up new skills. It was really interesting. So and I was lucky that that was like a little agency I was working for. I was lucky that they were very like purist in their approach. So they're very like clinical in the way that they taught everybody to do their exact process. So it was like a really good learning opportunity to learn how to do prototype testing correctly. And then from there I just thought, oh well, like I could do that. If it's research related, you could probably do it. If you're a researcher, you could probably pivot into another type of research quite easily, like without, maybe it, like, whoever's hiring doesn't see it that way, but you can do it. Essentially, it's just analytical research, like analytical thinking skills and problem solving and using data to find evidence to back those decisions. So that is essentially what it is. So yeah, I think you can transition, like you just have to back yourself. Yeah.
And know more about the jobs. And I know from working in recruitment that actually something like this is really useful, because I think a lot of people just don't really know what the different roles involve. Maybe something we should ask you afterwards.
Yeah, maybe.
Graham.
How many people fell into research here? I'm an anomaly. So I've been in the industry for a long time, and I actually fell into research. I didn't know what market research was. But I was interested in it. When I got into it, I really enjoyed it. But for me, I feel like you touched on it earlier, Tara. You were talking about curiosity. And I'm very curious. So I'd spend a couple of years in a role, I'd see something else, and I was like, I want to try that. I started seeing the industry evolve and online research start to really strengthen. And the industry was very, very slow to adopt it. But when they did embrace it, we saw so many different ways and so many different innovations coming within market research. So I thought, this is great, let's continue. But then part of me really wanted to understand what was being done with the data as well, because my background was really within quant data collection. So we'd be there, we'd understand what the research brief is, we'd collect the data, but we wouldn't know what's being done with this data. So I then moved on to a research agency in Newbury called Vance & Bourne. And we'd be working with these data sets. We were talking about this earlier. I would get the data set, I would look at it. Lots of yes, no responses, rating scales, top line open ends, etc. And I would make assumptions. I would say, well, 58% of people have said X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to assume that this means X, Y, and Z as well, A, B, C. But then another colleague of mine would take that data set and come up with a completely different story. And I liked really understanding what the insights were. What is the story that this data is telling? So again, I wanted to just understand a bit more and really focus on what is being done with that data and the story. And I remember, fast forwarding on a few years, I ended up working at a company called Lucid, where I met Ben over there. We got acquired by Cint. And Ben went on to a company called D-Scout, which is where we are now. D-Scout was in UX, and I had no idea what it was. When Ben was telling me how great it was, I was like, yeah, okay, I guess it's just qual, naively. When I started researching, I found it's so much more than qual. The reality is, when I had these data sets before, I was making assumptions. But within the world of UX, user researchers, you're speaking to the humans, you're finding out the why directly from them, not having to assume it. Why did you find this hard? Why did you like to do this? How did the cost of living impact you? You're hearing directly from the users. And I found that so powerful. And I like to think I'm a people person. So this is something that was a huge motivator for me. Going into a completely new industry, learning and developing, being able to take skills that I had learned in a different part of the research world and take it into user research, but also be a lot closer to the data and understand and get more depth as well. So yeah, that's my story.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you feel are the skills necessary to do your job well?
I'm going to go a bit off script. I wouldn't say it's the skills necessary because I feel we've all got skills here, and there's a lot of transferable skills as well. But one thing that really stood out for me from the world of market research, quant, data collection, quant research, etc., and then coming into user research, it's emotionally challenging. Like I touched on, when you're seeing videos of people talking about how their lives have been disrupted by the cost of living crisis, and that's why they're trying to improve their credit score, and that's why they're using this app. When you're talking to people that, about stomas and colostomy bags and things like that, you form these deep, strong bonds with them. You're doing one-on-one interviews with them. It's very, very hard to try and stay removed from these participants. And I think a massive difference for me, within my time as a researcher, market research, I saw the data as complete. Is that my time to hand the mic over? I saw the data as complete. It was very dehumanizing, and I remember I was at Research Now and I was saying to them, can we say something different, responses, or something where we think about these people as humans? Because somebody would come in and say, I don't like this data, can we take it out? And you're saying, well, this is a person that's gone through, taken their time and gone through it. Now, user researchers, you're actually seeing these people. If you're doing a usability test, you're seeing this person going through a mortgage application. You're seeing the challenges and hurdles, etc. You're seeing how hard it is for them sometimes if they've got background noise or one of their kids is fighting in the background and they're shouting at them and they're saying, I really need to get this done because I really need to get this mortgage because we need to move on to this house. You just really get pulled in. So yeah, I'm not talking about the skills because I think everybody in this room has the skills. If you've got the curiosity and the desire, you'll be able to succeed and do well. But you need to be really strong emotionally because you are going to form those bonds, and it's very hard to take a step back.
Something you put in your notes, which a client of mine said recently, is that it's not really like qual, it's much more like ethnography, which is really what you're saying there. I mean, I know ethnography is a sort of qual, but yeah, what you're saying backs that up, really. Well, what do you think, Sarah? Because obviously you're in the same...
I don't know. Maybe it's about interpretation. I'm trying to think what like the super skill is. You know, it's like sometimes when somebody's saying something, the more interesting thing is what's underneath what they're saying. I don't know. There's like a psychological aspect to user research that I think is really fascinating. Like it's not necessarily just what was said or which button they pushed, but there's like these deeper motivations and understanding that. And it takes like quite a long time to build that experience and that understanding of like the levers like sitting underneath like the, you know, like the psychology of what we all do. That's what's really interesting about it to me.
So you think anyone could go into it as long as they have that sort of curiosity about thinking in the mind and...
Yeah, it's a question of interest and potential. Like people have different potential and different aptitudes. So it sort of depends on your aptitude for it. But if you're curious about something, if you love something, you'll be curious about it and you want to know more about it. And I don't know, it's just like follow your curiosity and your interest.
Iain, what do you think you need to be a great client-side researcher?
I think certainly in my experience, there's a couple of things. One is stakeholder management. And the other is influencing skills, and they're both sort of related to each other because you want to make sure, one, that you are credible to those people, that you're trying to educate them to ask the right questions. When I first went to Specsavers, people saw me as a source of data, not as a source of insight. And therefore they'd say, can I have this number? And it took quite a while to go, why do you want that number? What problem are you trying to solve? What decision are you trying to make? And getting people to... So the first time is people would ask for certain stuff and I'd then take it. I'd basically rewrite what they wanted as a research brief to me and get them to sign off on that to try and educate them that they can come to me with a problem rather than with a request for data. But I think stakeholder management and influencing skills are things that you sort of have all the way through your life. If you're in research, you're still trying to influence someone, you're still trying to build up a relationship with someone so that you're credible, trusted, seen as somebody that they should listen to. It's just that I suppose the big difference is a lot of the people that I was doing research projects for when I was agency side were the researchers. So they would question you in a slightly different way, whereas all of my stakeholders now, none of them are researchers. They're all, retail operations people, supply chain, finance. But the skills that you pick up going through agency side about how to read people, how to understand what they're going to respond to, how to sort of cage things, how to position things, they're the same, because at the end of the day, they're all still people. We're all still people. It's about that relationship, and it's just sort of tuning into how these people might be slightly different to some of the people that you've dealt with before. But at the end of the day, they're still stakeholders that you're trying to convince them that what you're saying is worth listening to, and that they make the decision that you think they should from the research that you're doing.
A slightly unrelated question, but I know that you're in a fairly small team and you hadn't worked client side before. Who do you learn from? Where do you get your...
That's a very good question. Yeah, I went from basically working, I suppose when you're in a research agency, you're trying to stand out amongst a whole load of people who are very similar to you. I think there's about 50,000 people work for Specsavers worldwide. There's 4 people in my team, 2 in Northern Europe and 1 in Australia, and they're the only researchers in the business. You use Google a lot. You use your network of people that you built up on the 29 years before you went client side. Organisations like Aura are very good. I also sit on the Insight and Effectiveness group for ISBAR, which is the advertisers side of things. That's a really good forum. One of the things that my job has sort of moved into is I now look after sort of media effectiveness and econometric modelling, which I don't really know anything about. I still don't really know that much about it, but I've hired somebody who does, which is handy. But having those forums is really good because you are tapping into people who don't have all the answers, but between everyone, they do help no end. So yeah, learning from that. But also, one of the people in my team went through and did the MRS diploma, and I learned stuff from her as well, because when I came in, you spent 3 months in the telephone centre, 3 months in coding, and there wasn't an internet. So a lot of the new techniques you can learn from the people who've been through the training more recently. So you're always learning.
And Sarah, Graham, did you do any outside training in UX? Because you were new to it, or did you just learn on the job?
I did a little bit of just stuff. You can find quite a lot of stuff on LinkedIn to look at, like where people give, we can go to little 2-hour trainings or whatever. I considered going to General Assembly, so I almost signed up to do a course with them, but then I did the pre-work, and then I realized most of what they were teaching was research, and I knew that already. So I was just I'm sure I can just pick this up on the job. I'm sure it's just sometimes it's a matter of changing out certain words. It's not a discussion guide, it's a script. It's not a respondent, it's a participant. But essentially what you're doing is, you're collecting data and you're solving problems. And, if you've got a base in doing that, you can kind of pivot. You just can.
It seems more technical to me, but maybe I just don't understand the job.
Well, you have to get your ear in, with the designers. I don't know all the design words. I don't know, there's they have a jargon, you know, but like, I don't need to know, I'm not designing something, I'm collecting data and evidence, and I'm talking to like a person to find out like if they can use something, if it's easy, if it's difficult, if it makes sense, if it doesn't. That's what I'm doing. I'm collecting data and I'm analyzing it. I'm not a designer. Don't need to know that. So, yeah.
Designers hate me. They do. They're like, I'm like, that button. They have a scientific name. I don't know. I'm not going to remember. Just that button. But no, really, I didn't do any training. But what I did, sort of similar to you, is learning on the job. But also, I didn't want to go in and be the new guy, and everyone be looking at me and be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I looked at, we had a community called, we have a community called People Nerds. There were so many UX researchers as part of that, so I went in there, started looking at what people were saying, went to events, webinars. I met Nikki at, where did we go? I did it. I told you I was bringing you in. No, but where was the event? What was the event?
UX Insight.
That's it. So for me, it was less being trained, but more just immersing myself and speaking to people that have been part of the industry for years and years and are passionate about the industry, because personally, I felt that's how I would learn more and really ramp up and understand the industry more.
Can't actually remember the question now. What's the question?
The skills needed.
Sets.
Yeah.
It's probably not a skill, but maybe a mindset change, I would say. So agency side, if you do work agency side, that is, you'd probably be used to being a taskmaster. You've got 5 reports to do by the end of the week before the client starts niggling you. You need to get those done before your manager starts niggling you as well. You need to do this piece of analysis before X day. You've got to do these crosstabs to send on to the client. You've got this dashboard to create. You need to send that on to the client. It's very much a task-based operation, I would say agency side is. Client side is the flip of that, I would say, if you really want to nail it. And that's more being around a tactician and that strategic type of individual rather than a taskmaster. So instead of treating a report or a project as a single task, trying to think actually how can that impact the entire business instead of just one siloed maybe department. So yes, you'll get loads of different requests from like maybe the marketing department, maybe the social media team, all these different teams that you'll work with, and they'll all have their individual needs. But one need from a social media team might actually impact the marketing team. It might then impact the commercial team. It might impact all these other different departments. Then you can have a play in that. And that's where you become that more strategy mindset rather than just thinking a project as a task to complete at the end of the day. That I think, sets you up then as a researcher in a better way. If you think like that a little bit from a client side perspective, especially.
So I completely agree with what Iain was saying in terms of influencing being a really core skill, and specifically influencing up, so influencing the C-suite, because once they've got the buy-in, that's when the action really happens and you can see the business shaping and moulding the overall business strategy that actually relates directly to the insight that you've been delivering. And that's when you personally, well, for me personally, I feel I get the most that's when I get the most excited, when I actually see action coming from it. I'd also say a key skill is resilience. Resilience to really keep going, keep pushing. Like, there can be many layers of red tape. I know all businesses are completely different, but for the brand that I work for specifically, there are kind of many know red tape, and just having that resilience to kind of keep going, because once you get to, what you're doing in your heart of hearts is completely the right thing for the business, but you can get pushed back a lot, especially for maybe some people that have been in the business for many years, which in the company I work, there's people that have been there 30, 40 years. So it's really about kind of pushing back and bringing this new way of thinking. On the the training and kind of forums and bodies that have been really helpful. Aura, completely amazing. That kind of body of client-side researchers is just so powerful and so helpful. I'd also say, from my perspective, the Institute of Management Academy, the IMA, have been also incredibly useful. When I moved to the role, it was all about kind of re-establishing and rebranding the insight team. They'd very much been more of a, people would just come to them with like he was saying, like kind of just data requests. They weren't looking at us as people that were actually informing and leading the overall business strategy. So there was a big rebrand project that had to be undergone there, and the IMA were really amazing for that in particular.
So I do have a question in mind based off of something that Jake said a couple questions ago, actually. And I'm also making an assumption. So I'm assuming the people in this room are here for one of three reasons. You are looking for an excuse to get out of work early, you're here for the drinks after, or you actually want to make a transition in your career. It's one of those three things. And so going back to something that Jake mentioned, and I hope you can also expand on it, I would love to hear a little bit about what you all think are the questions you should be asking in order to figure out if the transition that you might want is a good fit. And I say this because I know a lot of people, I've always been agency side my entire career. I know a lot of people who just say, I just want to go client side. And then they go client side and they say, this isn't exactly what I thought it was. So if you could give the audience some questions that you think would be important for deciding whether or not something is a good fit for you, I think that would be great.
I was just about to say, what on earth did I just say 2 questions ago? But now you've reminded me, so that's fine. I think, so I was in probably a fortunate position when I joined SailGP because I knew the directors in place at the organisation previously, just from general networking. And then during that sort of final interview stage when it was with the chief exec, it was with the CMO at the time, and I probably got sold too easily. So just like any researcher, I'm super curious. So at the time it was in sport, and I love sport tremendously, and it was a sport role, client side. It was a win-win for me really to go into. And I think looking back, if I was in that room again, the number one questions I would definitely ask is one, tell me a time when you've looked or you've conducted a piece of research and it's impacted the business, and how has it impacted the business, whether that's on the bottom line, whether that's departmental, whether that's things like behaviour change internally. Just tell me a time when a research project has significantly helped the business, and I would very quickly get a good vibe in terms of, are they telling me porcupines, or are they actually telling me something what's happened internally? I think the other part is probably that vision for research. So I think it really depends on if you're the first researcher into the business, or whether you're maybe the third or fourth or fifth researcher. So for me at SailGP, the research team was Jake. That was it. So every request, everything was just coming through to my inbox at the time. What I would have loved to know though at that time when I joined was, what is the vision for research at SailGP? Was it the fact that we really want to impact across all these departments, and this is where we see the vision to be? Or was it going to be maybe really siloed and looking at maybe just ad testing or TV and for the commercial team? So getting a really good broad idea in terms of who and what the role would be. And then my probably final one was probably just to ask my network what I should ask for as well. So when I was agency side and looking for that client side role, I'm heavily on LinkedIn and things like that. And when you start sort of searching for things on LinkedIn, I couldn't really find someone client side who was sharing their stories and sharing what it was like. Those sort of the membership bodies that people have already mentioned are great assets to sort of think about, which if I was in that position again, that's what I would really go to as a resource to help navigate that direction you go into. They'll be my top top 2 or 3, I would say.
I feel like Jake's summarised it really well. I wish I had asked those questions before going client side. Completely agree. The vision is, and also the investment that they are all willing to give that insight team, that insight network, and so I would have probably asked a bit more in terms of the logistics as well, in terms of team, like bodies, like head count, kind of willingness to potentially expand as well, and investment in tools.
Do you think the size of the budget makes a difference? I know that I often get asked that.
Sorry.
Do you think the size of budget makes a difference? Because I know that I often get asked that. If we're talking about a client-side role, people go, what size is the budget?
Do you know what? Yeah, because I mean, at that point, if I'd asked that question, maybe I would have had an understanding just from proposals and insight work that I'd worked on from an agency side perspective, and understanding how much they cost versus like how much budget and client side insight team actually have. But I mean, I don't know about everybody else, so I can only speak to myself, but budgets do get cut throughout the year sometimes as well. Halfway through the year they sometimes get cut as well, and sometimes that's when you're at your most creative, because you have to be at your most creative because you've got to work with what you have, but you still want to deliver the best for the business, and you want to still maintain your insight reputation across the business. So you can get really creative, and investment in tools and applications, and continuously AI, which I'm sure everybody's looking at, utilising. There are kind of ways around it, I guess.
I think these two have sort of summed up a lot of it. I think the thing that you probably need to think about is where you get the most joy out of the job that you're doing at the moment, because there are certainly things that you will do less of. If you really like churning through data and finding stories in the data, there's probably less time to do that in a lot of roles. I think the other thing is just, and we mentioned it before, Liz, didn't we? We've all come from relatively small teams. I was thinking back to my days when I worked with Ford, and they had 100 people in their consumer insight team. I did work not that long ago with Boots, and they had 2 people just doing brand tracking, whereas I do brand tracking, on a second Tuesday morning, and then do loads of other stuff the rest of the time. So I think not all client-side roles are going to be the same. Some are very process-driven. So back to Ford days, they were a manufacturing company. They had a process to make a Mondeo. They had a process of what research went alongside making a Mondeo. That is very different to what I'm experiencing now, but it's very different to people you talk to in other industries, in other sectors and in other companies. So I think trying to match, understand and try and be true to yourself. I think I lied to myself quite a lot in my early life of this is what I really enjoy doing, this is what I want to do. Sounded sexy, and actually I didn't enjoy it. It's just, I did actually like doing research things. I didn't enjoy the sexy marketing stuff. I wish I'd thought that about 10 years before I did realise that. But it is quite difficult because there's sort of peer pressure on what you're supposed to like and what's supposed to be nice and what's supposed to be exciting and what isn't, and what's drudgery, and actually people find joy and people are good at different things. And I think just understanding what you're good at and being truthful to what you're good at, and then finding out the best way of getting paid to do that is probably the secret. That might be a client-side role. It might be another role within an agency. It might be changing direction. But that's probably the secret to successful careers, or happy careers anyway.
So Sarah, you were the clever one that realised you liked tactical research and you didn't need to be in sexy marketing.
Didn't need to be in sexy marketing. Well, yeah, that's why I studied it, to get to go to all the parties with marketing people. Now I'm just a big nerd looking at data. This hasn't really worked out. I don't know if I can really answer this question. I think it's like you don't know what something's going to be like until you're doing it, and that's just the truth of it. Like sometimes you just have to go take a risk and see how you feel about it. I think now I might not accept a role if it was too narrow. I know that I like to be more of a generalist. I like to get my hands on as many data points as possible, to get involved with as many root cause problems and stakeholders as possible. And I don't want to be like pigeoned into something that's too narrow.
And one of the differences is you obviously work for a huge company, Tesco's, compared to some of the smaller organisations. So do you think that makes that difference, that you get that variety? Because
I think like I worked at HSBC before, and it was a lot harder to get hold of data and even to get access to customers to speak to them there, so because everything's like really highly regulated, so it can get data can get quite stifled within the organization, whereas now there's like because it's grocery, it's not regulated, there's quite a free flow of information, and if you want to listen into customer calls, or if you want to get access to a dashboard, then you can get that, and that is amazing. I have so much more data to work with, and it's far more interesting. So I think that'd be something I'd be looking out for in future, just to kind of see what the role entails. Is it just going to be usability testing all day, or is there going to be something more strategic about it? What level are you going to be operating at? You can do something, more junior, where you're just doing prototype testing all day, but that's not really what's interesting to me. So I think as you go up, further up, up the ranks in your career, you probably want to be looking at doing something that's a little bit more strategic, that's a little bit more influential. That's what I'd be looking for now.
Thank you. I would be asking yourselves why, first of all. Why whatever company or whatever role that you're looking at, why has that one stood out for you? And then one of the key things that I always look at is that organization's values, and see if that organization's values align to mine. Thinking specifically about user research, for me it's a case of understanding, so you touched on something, Jake, about the business impact. How have they impacted businesses? I would switch that slightly and ask the questions, how have you impacted humans? What's the biggest thing that you've done to impact somebody's, spill drink on me, day-to-day lives? Because user research, from my perspective, is how we are impacting those people's daily lives. How are we making it better? So that's a key question I'd be asking. Additionally, you're working with the product teams and designers. So ask questions about those teams. Ask about what the product roadmap looks like. Ask about the toolkit. Are you going to be conducting diary studies and talking to people via WhatsApp to try and schedule in appointments? And is it all convoluted, or do you have something seamless in your toolkit where you're able to conduct a range of usability tests, diary tests, IDIs, and it's all easy for you? Because we know what it's like as researchers. It's long. You mentioned about somebody asking for reports to be done 5 o'clock on a Friday. We want to be able to free ourselves up so that we've got that time for the analysis. We don't want to be bogged down with systems, processes, red tapes. So it's really good to get an understanding of what those organizations are using as well.
You mentioned earlier the more further up you go, the more choice that sort of gives you, or at least responsibilities. I think a lot of people in the room are relatively new to the industry, or still in their more junior years. Are you able to share how you actually gone further up, and is there anything that you would recommend a lot of the people doing if they consider that, or anyone in the room maybe?
I think you need a really good, strong, solid research base. So if you're more junior, you just take every opportunity to learn from the best people around you, and then it's much easier after that. I feel like, I suppose now I sometimes see junior researchers just left a little bit to their own devices, and I think it's really important that you make sure that you've got somebody giving you feedback, and if you're not getting feedback, ask for feedback, especially from people whose work you admire, and just set yourself up correctly, and then from there it's much easier to I think there's a point, for me it was around the 10-year mark, where it's much easier, you can become a little bit more self-taught, because it just clicks into place, but until then just take every opportunity to learn from people around you.
I think one of the interesting things is most people end up in research just by chance, and actually all of you have really ended up in your current roles almost not exactly by chance, but something's happened that's meant, oh, you've got that job, rather than you deliberately sat down and mapped to go into that area. So, I mean, a lot of the time, I think it's about seizing the opportunity, getting the basics, but then going out and seizing the opportunity.
I think you guys touched on it a little bit, like Jake, Sarah, Graham, but following on from what you said, Liz, if knowing what you know now, if you were to take your agency CV and agency experience, how would you rewrite what it is that you did in a primary market research agency and spin it to something that would be attractive to either client side or UX? That you talked about it, like participants versus respondents and things like that. So I wondered if there was anything specific that you might think, if that was spun the right way, even though it's virtually the same thing, that would stand out a lot more to a prospective employer.
So I think, just go back actually to your question, because it was a really good question, and then I'll come back to you straight away. I think one of the big mistakes we make in the industry at the moment is we have this very good sort of tier approach at agency life, from like junior research exec all the way up to sort of research director level, and everyone sees that progression. What people very quickly miss though is, as soon as you hit that sort of director level role, half of that stuff you do at that time, you might not actually enjoy it. You might have actually enjoyed, similar to what everyone else has said, you might have enjoyed analysing all the data, you might have enjoyed looking after field work and running interviews, you might have really enjoyed putting reports together. But the higher up you go in any industry, you're going to be starting to do less and less of maybe what you were enjoying previously. And then you're going to be starting to adapt to what maybe a new normal is. And it's probably thinking about, what do you really enjoy about research when you've gone through looked after loads of different projects, what really is standing out to you and what makes you sort of wake up in the morning to think, I've got this to do, I've got that to do. So definitely that's something to think about. And then straight away to your question, I think the switch I made was switching it to making sure that as soon as someone opened my CV, they knew how I've actually helped that business. So instead of saying that, yes, I've run this 7-market international tracker for X brand, or I've done this segmentation study for X, Y, and Z, which really means not a lot, spinning that to say, yes, I've run this brand tracker, but it's actually impacted this business in X, Y, and Z way, which has helped them to enable them to get more budget from a marketing standpoint, or to understand, where should they put more resource, all those sorts of different things, how research can help, but putting an ROI behind, your work when you're trying to go into that, client side role. And then also picking out some of the challenges that have come your way as well, and understanding that, like we've all said, there's a time when you've got to influence people client side. So from an agency's perspective, how have you influenced one of your clients, maybe to change methodology or think about recommendations in a different way, all those sorts of things that you can try and add into your CV or a covering letter to stand out in the market. Definitely. It's not just about the tasks, it's about the strategic type of things that you can do as well.
I think they're both really good points. How you've influenced people and impact. But if you can put both of those in your CV, it makes a huge difference.
I was just going to say, the sad thing is hardly anyone client side, apart from the researchers, care about the process. They just care about the outcome. And therefore showing that you were instrumental in achieving that outcome is all that they're really interested in, sadly. The fact that you did the most thorough segmentation and used the right regression analysis on that model doesn't matter. Did we make the right decision at the end of the day, and was it clear what that decision should be, and did it work? That's sort of where they're coming from. All the other bits are down to you, so just assume that that's going to be right.
So are you going to switch again, or are you in your eternal happy place? If the answer is yes, just a reminder, Liz has got a QR code behind you. And I'm really interested to hear what you say, Graham.
That's my boss. I'm going to be switching again. No, you know what? I spent 25 years in my previous roles within market research. I think user research has been, honestly, it's incredible. And this isn't me trying to sell it to you. I'm not a salesperson, as you can gather. But I love being able to come in on a daily basis, speak to Ben, speak to the other people in the team, look at the results coming in, hear some of the stories, being able to share some of these stories even before we've finished the data collection. So we're able to delve into those insights. And the thing is, I've only been in it for 13 months. I've still got a lot more to learn and understand. And it's been so exciting now. I know some people follow me on Instagram and they're like, Graham, you've gone to this event. Graham, you've done this, you've done that. And that's all as a result of my role and being within this industry. It's honestly, for me, it's been so exciting and such an opportunity to learn as well. So no, I won't be. One thing I wanted to add was just touch on what you said as well. In terms of being junior, I've managed teams, a lot of teams throughout my time. And one thing I've always said to the junior people in those teams, hold your managers to account. And I know this is scary. It's scary to say, hey, I need this from you. But ultimately, it's your careers. If you can't hold your managers to account, then how are you going to develop? And there's a misconception when it comes to management. A lot of people think that you have to report up to your manager, when actually it's your manager's duty to ensure that you all succeed. If you're not succeeding, your manager has failed you. If your manager is not giving you the tools to succeed, they failed you. And I used to say that to all my reports. If I'm not helping you succeed, if you are not seeing a progression from month 1 to month 6, tell me how I can support you because I failed you. And I think we need to get comfortable with being able to provide that feedback to them and say, this is what I need from you. When can you provide it to me?
Poor Hannah, I'm going to embarrass her slightly, but it's. I think Hannah and I once had a conversation about the different speed settings between agency life and client life. And I think it'd be good to share some of the insights that you had about how you sort of, your realisation and how you address the differences between what life is like in agency and clients.
Jake, I know you mentioned it earlier in terms of the speed kind of agency side, and I think that was one of the things that maybe sometimes is a bit too fast, especially 5:30 on a Friday evening. But the speed and the pace and the excitement and the travel was something that I loved and just fed off, and it was super exciting and working on lots of different clients, and that was one of my big nervousnesses about moving client side. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to be working on one brand, and that maybe isn't that exciting, but I guess it's really kind of what you make of that role really, and the actual kind of different research activities that you do within that role can make it exciting and pacey. But yeah, one thing I did find when I went to client-side role that and I've touched on it I guess already in terms of the kind of the red tape can really slow things down. So one of the things that was a bit of a shock to me was the kind of brick walls that I sometimes face that you had to kind of knock down before you could get any further, and it just felt sometimes that we were going quite slowly through that process. But I think also that's a learning curve as well, because since the 5 years that I've now been client side, you kind of start to find ways around it, and you find the loopholes, and you know the person to go to or the people to speak to try and speed it up. But yeah, that was a kind of big realization for me. I think the fast paciness of agency side going to suddenly a little bit more of a bit of a slower pace there.
So would you switch again?
Oh gosh, I mean, never say never, but yeah, there are times when I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go dip my toe in the water in agency side. But no, right now I'm client side, happy. I feel like I've still got some really big things that I want to achieve client side, and then maybe I'll re-look at that.
I
Hi everyone, and thank you for that. It was really interesting to hear about all of your experiences. I'd love to know your favourite thing about working client side and also what you miss about agency life.
I'll be blunt about this. I don't miss procurement because they do slow the heck down of things, if I'm honest, from a research point of view. And I never got my say on that until similar to other people what said, you find your way around different things to help move things forward. I miss client side, the bit about that ROI piece now. So seeing the end goal of that research project a little bit, but interestingly now I probably ask my clients very, very different questions than I did maybe 2 or 3 years ago since that client side experience. So I nearly force the client to tell me what's been happening with this research and how it's helped. So I get that sort of personal ROI from it. And that also challenges the client to make something happen and really go out of their way to really help their organisation move forward. So I would say procurement, client side, and then now probably the ROI piece as well from it. But I'm sure you've got something else to say as well.
I suppose the bit that I miss from agency side is if you worked on projects, and I know not everyone does, but a lot of the agency work I did was on a project, or there'd be a tracker and there'd be an end point. There's no real end points client side. It sort of is always ongoing because it's always the business is evolving. There's more questions. So I think I missed that. Oh, thank God that's over because it's never really over. It just carries on. We're having conversations about things that I was having conversations about the day that I walked into Specsavers. I think you do get a lot closer to so the good thing though is that you do get closer to the things that the business does. So there are lots of things that we've done, the ads that are out there at the moment, that are Specsavers ones. I can sort of see where I had my mark in it, and I suppose most people from their careers want to make a difference. It sounds a bit trite, but we all sort of want to go, this moment was improved by something that I did personally, and the closer you can put yourself to that, certainly from my perspective, the more satisfaction you get from that. And I know all the ads that didn't get made and the one that did, and what our role was as an insight team on making the one that we did. We've launched products, but we haven't launched loads of products, so I know sort of which ones they are. And also I know the ones where actually there were people who wanted to do something different, but because of the way we put together the insight and presented that and convinced the right people that we've done what we've done rather than what's at the start of it some other people would have wanted. So I do feel as though, which was what I was looking for from a client side role, so I do feel as though I've achieved that, but it does just keep going on.
And presumably in user research, you see the output of what you've done pretty quickly as well, do you?
You would hope, right? Yeah.
You would hope, yes.
Yeah, it is nice to see that. It is nice to see the impact. It is a bit more connected, definitely. So it took me a while to figure out what I miss about agency life. I suppose it's the challenge or the accountability with other researchers. Sometimes you can just be a little bit like on your own as a researcher, like in my corporate job, just responsible for my own things. You work together with other people, but like in the beginning I really missed working with other researchers and thinking together with other people on a problem, so that was really hard, but I've adjusted to it now. The thing I like about client side is how deep you can go into a problem, so much deeper than you can ever get into any problem in marketing research is how far you can go on client side. So just trying to figure out what the root cause problem is, how all the pieces connect together, who the stakeholders are to influence, and it can take literally months and months to kind of figure it all out. You'd be surprised how long you'd be trying to figure out what's even causing the problem that you're trying to fix in the first place. So that bit is super, super intellectually stimulating, and I love it. So yeah.
On that note, I just wanted to thank Tara for putting this on, because I'm sure it has helped. I'm sure it has helped a lot of people, hopefully, with thinking about your next career steps. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our amazing lineup of panellists. You have been absolutely fantastic this afternoon, so thank you. And thank you to Liz and Nikki for being our co-hosts and moderating this afternoon's session.